Right, today I'm talking to Rupert Mackeson. Should be sir, but he said Rupert is fine. He's known to many racegoers as the genial gentleman that runs a mobile bookshop on racecourses selling prints, books, etc. What many people may not know, he's also a titled aristocrat, Rupert.
No, I'm a baronet. Certainly not an aristocrat.
But you're a titled, you're a sir.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your early life? Were you brought up in horse racing?
Well, I come from a funny thing, a racing family. We're very much Kent. Myself and my sister are probably the first people not to live near Dover for many generations. My grandmother was one of the Ripleys, and her brother was one of the great amateurs in the late sort of 1890s, early 1900s. Rode winners for the king and people like that as an amateur. And that was on my father's side. And as it happens, on my mother's side, one of our cousins, her second horse, won the Derby in the 30s. So I come from a racing background, hunting, farming background in Kent. So I was brought up with ponies, and then I went on to horses.
I understand you went to Harrow. There's quite a few famous sort of racing people went there. Have you got
my contemporaries. One was John McCrick, who's still with us, and the other who isn't with us, of course, was Julian Wilson. So I was contemporary of two TV people at Harrow.
Were they good pals at the time?
Who?
Were they good pals at the time?
Well, we all knew each other. We all mucked along. We were all interested in racing. I was riding in point to points when I was at Harrow.
So then I understand you were, well, you just mentioned you were riding in point to points. You're an amateur jockey. How successful were you?
I was probably all right for the first few years. I rode point to point winners in both England and Ireland, so I rode quite well for a few years. I had one or two falls too many. I rode some nice winners on the flat in Europe, in Germany and Belgium, so I had 6 or 7 good fun years.
And then I understand you joined the Royal Horse Guards. Were you called up, or did you decide to?
No, I always was going to be in the army. I went to university in Ireland, where I spent most of my time riding out or riding for a chap called George Wells. And I spent the first 4 years in my family regiment, the East Kent Regiment of Buffs. And when I left university, I transferred into the Horse Guards because I like riding. So I rode around London on black horses.
I understand one of your other sporting interests is coursing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. Once again, I come from that type of background, a farming background. I was coursing down in Kent, and I got very lucky as a young man after my father died. I listened to what I was told, and I understood fast Irish bloodlines when no one else did. I won the Waterloo Cup with a half Irish dog. I was given a wonderful dog by a priest of mine, a friend of mine in the army. I won a big coursing event in 66 or 7 at Newbridge with a dog called Stormy Sirius. And then I went on with I was a friend of Ernie Gaskin, who was one of the great trainers in the latter part of the last century, and I bought 2 puppies from him, and I won the Clonmel Derby with dogs called Newdown King and Heathermore King. So I was very, very lucky. I just got lucky. I understood bloodlines and cashed in. I listened to what I was told.
So you must have been quite devastated when the sport was banned.
I think it's a great pity. Same with hunting. It's taking away part and fabric of British country life. But it still goes on coursing, I'm pleased to say, in Portugal, in Ireland, in Spain. It's only in England where it's banned.
Now, moving on, after you left the army, where you started to become a little bit notorious, you ran a financial institution in this city, I understand, with some less than savoury characters involved in it.
Yes, I was. When I left the city, I became a successful stockbroker, and I was headhunted to go and run a financial operation called Yupitech belonging to the Zilka brothers, and that all turned very nasty. People ended up drinking cyanide in prison in Italy, hanging under Black Friars Bridge with bricks in their pocket and things like that. There's no doubt if I hadn't left England, I would have been snuffed.
So then you moved to Africa.
Yes, I wasn't quite as silly as people think I am. I knew very well that UDI Rhodesia, which was independent Rhodesia under Smith, was no extradition. So I went to live in Rhodesia, which was great fun, and made a lot of money as a smuggler. It was the last days of a Smith regime, and all the fat cats were trying to get their money out before black rule.
But it all went a bit wrong, didn't it? You ended up in a prison camp, if I
Well, no, it wasn't quite as simple as that. Towards the end of UDI, in Rhodesia, where I was living, wasn't recognised by the British government, and the Rhodesians had lost the Bush War, and they're very keen to be recognised by England. So they thought of a scheme. It was a warrant out for my arrest in England. There's no secret about that. So they said, we have Mackeson. If we send Mackeson back to you, would you like us to send Mackeson back? And they said, oh yes, said Scotland Yard, which was at the time treason. They shouldn't have been talking to the officials in UDI Rhodesia. So being particularly stupid, they sent my passport back to England, which the British government promptly cancelled. So they made me a stateless person, which was particularly clever of Margaret Thatcher and all her cronies. And I was shoved into a prison pending being sent back to England. But the Rhodesians and the British government, et al., had a problem. There were no direct flights from England, from Rhodesia to England. It was still UDI Rhodesia being run by Smith. And so they couldn't get me back to England with no way of getting me back. So they deported me with no passport or travel document to South Africa, right? When I'm in South Africa, there's no executive order against me in South Africa, so I'm a free person. And then some horrendous female from the High Commission in Pretoria had me carried onto a British Airways plane. Now, she had no right to have me carried onto a British Airways plane, and the moment I got onto a British Airways plane, I fought my way off. Now, I knew perfectly well that you cannot take off any civil airline anywhere in the world unless everybody's in their seats and belted up, safety belts. So they had a problem, so I was carried off the plane and eventually returned to Rhodesia. So that was game, set and match to me. So I'm then returned to Rhodesia, and the Rhodesians are now looking particularly stupid. It was at this stage, it must have been extremely funny, that Scotland Yard, of course, as we all know in those days, the Metropolitan Police were all on the take from the press. So Scotland Yard said, on the 15th of May on flight 11XY from Jan Smuts Airport at Johannesburg, Sir Rupert Mackeson will be on it and we'll arrest him. So they turned up at Heathrow with all the press who they were drawing money from, and unfortunately for them, I didn't get off the plane. So they were left with a tremendous lot of egg in their face. And that's when they made the famous remark that I was number 7 on their 10 wanted men list, and I'd caused them more trouble than anybody, Ronnie Biggs. I was then from South Africa, taken back. I had a lot of money with me, I must say. I made an awful lot of money in Africa. I had a vast amount of Rhodesian money with me when I was eventually exported to South Africa, not to England. I was then taken back to Rhodesia by the South African authorities, and they were now fairly stumped. They had failed in their attempt to get me to England, and the whole thing had become a bit embarrassing for Rhodesian authorities, Metropolitan Police, the Home Office, et al. So in those days in Rhodesia, it was strict segregation. You had prisons for white people, you had prisons for the coloureds, Cape Coloureds and Asians, and you had prisons for blacks. So they decided that they would break me by sending me to a black concentration camp. I think it was called Kami. I could be mistaken, outside Bulawayo. So that's fine. I'm driven to Kami. Now, I'm the only white prisoner there, and I'm put in a cell, right, in a prison block. And and they take all your clothes off, so you're put in a cell. If you're a white man in those days, you're meant to have a bed and mattress and things like it. But if you were a black man, you slept on the floor. Anyway, so I'm put in a cell, a la black man, no bed, and absolutely naked, right? So the next morning, they unlock all the cells, and out come all the black prisoners, absolutely naked, who stand by their cell. And then they unlock me, and there's the prison governor there, an assistant prison governor, and a couple of white prison officers with sticks to hit me if I'm naughty, and another white prison officer with a dog to bite me if I'm naughty. I mean, I could have been a sort of animal. So I come out and I go, power, and give a black power salute. Now, then all the blacks who know who I am, because they can talk to each other in the night by leaning out of their windows, they all scream Mackeson and give black power salutes. Now, this completely flipped the prison authorities. So I was then shoved back in my cell. But I was then taken to a prison block where I was the only prisoner, because they thought I was going to lead a riot. It wouldn't have been very hard to lead a riot. There you are.
So eventually, they got you back to the UK.
Yes. When I was very lucky. Rhodesia was a mixture of very corrupt people and one or two very nice, honest people. I was very lucky. I had a good solicitor, two good solicitors, a good solicitor in Salisbury when it all started, but an excellent solicitor in Bulawayo called Peter Prinsloo. And I must have been one of the first people ever in the history of, well, I was one of the first people in the history of Rhodesia or South Africa to get out of prison on a habeas corpus, which means produced the body. So I got myself out of detention, or at least Peter Prinsloo did, got me out of detention in front of some famous judge in an international, very famous case on a habeas corpus, because they completely boxed everything up about why I was in detention. So that was quite fun. One of the funniest things was they sent a psychiatrist to see me. It was the Rhodesian authorities sent a psychiatrist to see me, who said not only was I in good physical health, but seeing what I'd been through, I'd been remarkably sane, which most people probably would disagree with, but he did kindly say that. And then, you see, we used this against the authorities because I was meant to be held for deportation, and they had no right to have me psychoanalyzed. So I'm then let out, go back to my business for a few months, and just before UDI, the night before Prince Charles let our friend Mr. Mugabe become Prime Minister, I was sent back to England with a pistol to my head. Now, I was told by a prison officer or policeman, all the same, one of Smith's henchmen, now you either go on that plane tonight back to England, or you'll get a bullet in the head and we'll feed you to the crocodiles. So I can tell you, if you're a question of going on a plane or being fed to the crocodiles, the plane's a very much better option. And when I came back to England, I was very lucky. I had great solicitors again. I had Louis Blom Cooper, one of the great QCs, act for me. Lord Chief Justice and two other High Court judge, that was Lord Lane, ruled I'd been kidnapped, and I was once again let free. So it was game, set and match to Mackeson.